I have been online for so many years. My audience have grown up with me. They have observed the journey I've been on for so many years. There have been so many shifts. I've had a lot of eyes and a lot of criticism on certain life choices I've made. But I think it's in those moments that those chapters of change in my life where I receive the criticism of that change, that's when I'm highly vulnerable and I take it on board because I have these doubts myself. I'm having those exact fears. They're often saying all of the things that I'm already feeling inside. And that's when it is most challenging for me because it's a sore point.
All this attention that people focus on someone else's life, it drives me bananas because every single one of us goes through turmoil. Every single one of us goes through challenge. Every single one of us goes through transition. The difference for someone like you is that you're doing it out loud, is that you're doing it publicly and having all these people who are reading the lines as they're being written. And then some of them having the wherewithal to think that they get to comment on it and tell you where to go. And the real strength here and the real skill set is understanding how to hold your pen firm and keep writing the story that you want to be writing, regardless of what anyone else has to say about it. Welcome to It's Not What You Think, the podcast that takes you on a transformative journey to rewrite your story of greatness and reawaken your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Celine DaCosta, a subconscious mind expert, master coach, and believer in the limitless power and magic that lives within all of us. My intention in this podcast is to propel you into your next level of success so that you are free to create the life that your heart most desires. Through deep, actionable insights, personal stories, and world-class guests, I'll provide you with the tools, strategies, and resources you need to unlock the fullest expression of who you're meant to be in this lifetime so that you can consciously design a reality that is beyond what you could have ever dreamed of. Join me on this journey to personal growth and evolution, and let's live our lives in accordance with our highest soul's calling. This podcast is your weekly check-in to help this path become more simple, obtainable, and fun. Thank you for tuning in today, and now let's dive in. Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome back to It's Not What You Think. I have a beautiful friend of mine with me here today, Naomi Smart. Hi, Naomi. I'm super looking forward to having her on today because we are going to have a real conversation around social media, influence, fame, what it really means to be online in contemporary world. And Naomi is the best person to have this conversation with. She has been a content creator on YouTube for for over a decade, actually. Not just a few years, over a decade. And she has amassed over 1.4 million followers on YouTube. She has been a social media influencer talking about health and wellness, lifestyle, just sharing her journey online. And she's got a lot of experience that she'll be sharing with you all today of what it actually means to be a public figure online. I actually met Naomi a couple of years ago back in Bali. She is dating one of my close friends, and we actually met because I was at this close friend's house, and I was like with another friend just singing and drumming, like a medicine drumming on my medicine drum, and she just walks in like from a casual, very normal date. And there I am just like drumming like a crazy person. And she's like, what is this? I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. So we met in a really funny, weird, quirky way. And over the years, I got to drop in with Naomi quite a few times and have very deep life conversations about, you guys, you're listening to this podcast. You know what I mean? Like life conversations, what is the meaning of life, the universe, astrology, all these things. And we were together a couple of weeks ago in Ireland, and we got to talking, and the topic of social media came up, my experience with it, her experience with it. And we came to this point where we're like, let's have this conversation out loud because we feel that a lot of people could benefit from this. So with all of that being said, Naomi, before we dive into the conversations, I'm going to pass the baton over to you. would you be able to formally introduce yourself and let us know what you're most excited about for today's episode?
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. I am so happy to be here. And it has been personally quite a journey with social media. And I feel when we got speaking about this a few weeks ago in Ireland, it just felt like such an interesting topic that I personally feel ready to speak about. Having been on social media for so many years, over 10 years, and really seeing the evolution of it, I'd love to share my piece. But I feel like what I'm most excited about today is your brutal but honest, raw questions that you you never hold back on. Like we'll just be sat in a cafe and then you'll share your reflections and they can be quite confronting, but they always leave me thinking about them for days afterwards. And I feel like you can be such a great mirror to your friends in that you see things from a different perspective that maybe I wouldn't be ready and willing to see myself. So I'm excited for that and nervous.
You just reminded me actually, a few years ago, I remember doing a survey as part of like some market research, and I asked my friends to use the top 3 words that they would immediately describe me as. I actually don't remember what the other 2 were, but one of the words that you just reminded me of is confronting. I've actually had multiple of my friends describe me that. That's what I've been put on this planet to challenge and to, break old shit up and find new ways, new paradigms, pave the way for that. So I'm really glad that you are here to welcome this in, because I actually had another podcast guest recently, and she after we finished the episode, she's like, "I've got to tell you something." It's like, "What is it?" It's like, "Well, right before I stepped into this episode," and she's got a really strong connection to God, and she's like, "God just said to me, she's gonna grill you," and it was true. So my fame, my reputation precedes me. But anyways, before we go there, let's take a step back, Naomi, and give people context as to your experience with the social media world, because we briefly mentioned you've been doing this for over a decade. You have, over 1 million on Instagram, over 1 million followers on YouTube. So we know that you've got followers. We know you're a public figure. But can we take a step back and can you walk us a little bit through your story of how did you get started on social media? Yeah, how did you get so big? And let us into your world at the beginning stages of you actually beginning this journey.
Yeah. Honestly, the whole thing happened by accident because it happened so many years ago. This was before the world of influencer. It was something that I would never have at the time predicted how big this whole world of social media would get. So when I started, I had just graduated from university. I just got my law degree. So the plan was at that point to continue on with law, go on to law school. And then that was kind of what I thought the path was for me at the time. I had an amazing group of friends back in my hometown of Brighton in the UK. And they were all kind of towards the end of university. They were posting on YouTube and vlogging and just having fun with it. And I found it fascinating. And my partner at the time was one of these who was doing it. And I got to the point separately where I realized I didn't want to progress my career in law. It didn't feel like it was flowing. It wasn't right. And that was the first time in my life actually reflecting on it now where I chose a path that wasn't expected of me, but I was really following my heart. The problem was I had no idea what I did want to do. So this was the kind of a very confronting time for me where I was at a crossroads where I knew I didn't want to progress with law, but I couldn't see what the path ahead was. I ended up working in a shoe shop in my hometown while I figured it out. So I was just like, I actually loved it. Walking around in high heels, the whole thing was ridiculous, but it was so much fun. And I was like 21, not knowing what to do with my life, had a law degree, but was kind of throwing it away to a degree. But I had this group of friends who were posting on YouTube, and I started being kind of in the background of their vlogs, kind of as we were hanging out and traveling around. And my partner at the time, he was vlogging as well. I was naturally involved, and their audiences started requesting for me to create my own channel. I was so hesitant and apprehensive about this because I was like, oh, I'm not that kind of person. At the time, especially, I wasn't a kind of extroverted person. I was more kind of, to myself, like didn't see myself as the kind of person who would put a camera up and start recording and talking to myself. And I was just like, I just can't do it. I can't do it. Anyway, as time went on, I ended up having one of the girls help me create my own channel. And I was so nervous, but I was like, oh, I feel like I could share some of my cooking videos. Like, I've kind of got this summer off. It could be fun. Like, we could kind of film together. Let's just see what happens. And from there, it just absolutely snowballed. Like, it was unbelievable, the momentum that it all took. I ended up falling in love with it. I found it so much fun. We were so young. I mean, we were 20, 21, 22 years old, flying over to LA to film with the other like LA YouTubers, and we formed this gang. So I was part of like this British gang. We had our American gang, and we would just film videos together. And at the time, this was just purely for the laughs. And this was still around a time on YouTube where it was like funny cat videos, it wasn't like what it is now. So I don't believe any of us could have predicted where it would all go for all of us. Because, 11 years on, maybe even 12 years on now for some of them, we've all gone in slightly different directions, but where we were all those years ago really paved the way and created so much opportunity for all of us, even though we've gone in slightly different directions. But, coming up to speed now with where I am, I've had this kind of reflection of, I don't really understand, like, why did I get so many followers? Like, what is the purpose? And we'll get into this, I'm sure, but as my spiritual journey has evolved, I've started realizing, oh, okay, there's a reason for the followers. There's a purpose here. There's a deeper meaning for me and what my offering is and what I feel the opportunity is there as well. But that's how it all started. And I get so many questions now from people much younger than me asking like, oh, I want to have lots of followers on YouTube. How did you do it? Can you like help me and teach me? And I would absolutely love to have a formula that I could share, but I don't, because it happened so long ago and without the intention, really, without real knowing of what it would become.
So super interesting, this piece that you're saying. This is actually a recurring theme that I've noticed, not just, with people that have big followings, but even when people ask me, how did you decide to become a coach? Or how did you get on Forbes or TEDx? Or with clients that, some of the clients that I'm serving, where it's like, how did you create multi-seven figures in like less than a year? These questions get asked, but a recurring theme that's been coming up actually in this podcast as well is that when you are in that space of being in alignment and being in your joy of being in flow, you don't actually know what's going to happen. And so it's really interesting because I even see a lot of people being like, here's your 7-step formula to like making 1 million followers. And if you were to, for example, if you were to create something like that, based, here's my whatever step, here's my course for how to create 1 million followers, it would just be your guesswork of you trying to reverse engineer what was essentially you being in flow and being in alignment. And that's what I find, when I coach my clients as well, and they're like, how do I get on Forbes? How do I get on TEDx? And it's like, it's not about a step-by-step process. It's actually about you being in flow, you having a message that you have to share, you having the conversations with the right people, you getting in front of the right people. Like, it's different because what's truly matters in the end, what will get you these results is the alignment that you're in. And even, when I speak to people like yourself that have such a gather such a massive following, honestly, there's very few of them that were like strategically Like, I'm going to have 1 million followers in this much time, and I'm going to do this action and this action and this action, and this will result in over 1 million followers by this much time. It doesn't actually work like that. It's really about like what's in store for you. And it seems to me that when you were that young, you found a passion for it, you found a love for it, and then it was one of those things where the universe was calling you into it. It's not that you raised your hand and opted in. It's that you happened to be hanging out with people, and then their audience happened to be requesting you. And because they were requesting you, you happened to give this a try, and then you happened to fall in love with it, and you happened to create more. And that happened to create, like, strike a nerve in within culture. So that feels something really important to point out, as I've experienced that myself so many times when people ask me about my career and the trajectory of my career. I'm like, I was just following what I felt was the right thing to do at the time, and I couldn't have pre-planned it if I tried. So out of curiosity then, in this trajectory, we're looking at over a decade for you. Where was that point? Because you said when I was really young, I really loved it. It was so fun and I was obsessed. Where's the point where that, like, woohoo, fun, woo, obsessed piece started to shift? And what did that look like?
Yeah, interesting question. I feel like the first time I started maybe doubting it, or fears started arising, was 2 or 3 years in, when I noticed negativity. And this is kind of where we start getting into trolling. I started receiving really nasty, cruel messages that were very, very personal. And I was still so young, and I definitely took it to heart, and I read everything, and it really knocked me. But I think also separately to that, creativity, it's not linear and it's not consistent. And I think this was an expectation or pressure that I put on myself to, it was like, oh, now I am a content creator, I'm just going to keep on creating. But then I eventually hit a wall, as I think most creators of any form find themselves. And I took a bit of a pause, and then that came back, and my creativity grew, and I started, feeling more inspired. And then I started creating content again. And then the same pattern repeats, and it has, ever since, for many, many, many years. I personally find it very challenging to stay inspired consistently at such a high level constantly, and to always be posting. So I take months out of like not posting, and it doesn't mean I'm not doing anything in the background. I'm not kind of like slumped in a corner, just like hibernating somewhere. I'm very much in those periods looking for inspiration and busying myself with other avenues, I suppose. But I think that's where I first recognized that pattern, was probably 3 years in, of like, I can't keep up posting. At the time I was posting 3 times a week. And every now and again I would do daily vlogs. So it would literally be like filming all day, uploading every day. There was something called Vlogmas. I would do it every single year. And the whole month of December, I'd film the whole day, wake up in the morning, edit and upload and schedule it for the next night, while then recording again that day. And that would happen for the whole month of December. I loved it though. It was so much fun. I think because I geared up that period of like, this is going to be like a month of filming, month of uploading, a month of editing. And I think I prepared myself. But there would always be that kind of dip come January of just creative overload and just total exhaustion of sharing everything 24/7. And that's where I recognize that pattern of like, okay, so January, February is where I slow down and kind of recoup, reset, and then slowly get back into it with like weekly vlogs, let's say. But I notice that with creativity in general, to be honest. But the trolling, as I said earlier, that definitely plays a part in that too.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that there's a piece around trolling. There's a piece around pressure to create and needing to create. And there's a part of you that loved it, but there's also a part of you that is like, there's a lot of people that want my content. They're waiting to be fed with my content. So I want to take these one at a time, because the first piece that you are hitting on is something that I know people are so freaking terrified of, even at like 2,000 followers. I mean, I can't tell you, like, this is one of the main reasons when I do my story work with people that they will not want to tell their story, that they are afraid to tell their story, is because of the fear of being shamed, of being judged, of being trolled. For people who have smaller followings, this looks like people, that their high school friends, or people that are closer to them. But in your experience, when you actually have, that when you amass that amount of followers, you actually start getting judged, attacked, criticized by people you don't even know. I mean, it's bad enough to get it from your family and, like, people that you've worked with once upon a time or went to high school with or whatever, your Aunt Joe, or your aunt, Aunt Joe, everything happens these days, your Uncle Joe or whatever. But it's really important. This is this piece around you receiving hate from people who never freaking met you. And I'm curious, because you've had, I mean, you said that was 2 years in, so it's been 8 years. Like, you are, I hate saying this, but you're used to it, in the sense that, like, you've been receiving hate for quite a few years now. And so I'm curious about what that journey has been like for you, because I'm sure that as a young 20-something-year-old, like you said, you were reading all the comments, and like, what happened? How did that impact you? And how did you learn to, quote unquote, deal with this? And where are you now in your journey with it?
It's been a journey, and I think it's only recently that I've realized that it's not normal to be reading negative stuff about you every single day. And it has been, let's say, 8 years of receiving negativity online. Also, it's very important to point out here, 8 years of a lot of love too. And that's also not normal. The fans, you're amazing, your videos are the best, like, incredible, heartwarming, uplifting messages from strangers as well. But, like, is that normal too, on a daily basis, for like a 21, 22-year-old to be reading every single day, like, constant gratitude from other people, but then on the flip side, the absolute opposite of total hatred. And it's only in recent years, I suppose, in the last couple of years, that I've reflected on how, my 20s really weren't normal. Not just in the obvious sense of having over 1 million followers and all the opportunities that came from it, but just being in that realm of, like, extreme love and extreme hatred on a daily basis, and constantly, it's like this ebb and flow of, like, extreme highs of being, I feel so, like, proud, and the work I'm doing is so amazing and I absolutely love it, to then literally within minutes that could be a total crash of, like, everyone hates me, what am I doing, I'm absolutely mortified, I never want to do this again. And it's obviously stabilized now, but I think in my early 20s, younger years of this, it was such, like, extreme highs, extreme lows, kind of like a toxic relationship, I suppose. And it's only recently that I've realized how that has probably affected me, and I've had to deal with this my own way, and it's been such a long, slow and gradual journey. I think the biggest hurdle was even becoming aware of that, because it was just my norm. So the awareness was the key of, like, okay, I can see, like, the pattern here and how this is dysregulating my nervous system on a daily basis. I've worked with various coaches and therapists over the years around this, of just the feeling of many eyes on me. And I think, as you say, everyone has this to a degree, whether it's with your friends, your colleagues, your family, this fear, I think, that is still instilled of, like, the fear of being seen, the fear of being heard, because of the fear of being completely shut down and criticized and judged. I think the thing is, I went into this completely blind and naive and unaware of what I was getting myself into, really. And then with that naivety, kind of a bit of a shock of like, oh, it's not all kindness and lovely and all love and light out there. There's, it can be a brutal, harsh place. So it was quite an awakening, I think, for me, and to just see such clear black and white, complete contrast of life, I suppose, and I suppose the messages and the comments that I was receiving every day on my YouTube videos, my Instagram DMs, it's very clear and obvious. And it's something I still deal with now. It's not something I have completely figured out, and it doesn't bother me. But in a general, broader sense, one thing that I am on the journey of right now is learning to lean more into the love and let go of the fear, because I really, truly feel in my heart that fear is what holds so many of us back. And it's obviously easier said than done. And it doesn't mean I just completely brush it under the carpet. But rather than taking on board the hatred, I really am consciously taking on board the love too, learning to receive the love as well. And this has been a massive, massive journey and work in progress right now.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you. I'm hearing a few things here. The first thing that I'm hearing is that when it comes to people, throwing their fears, and we can sit here and also, this is that they're just projecting their own shit at you. Like, we know this, that they are seeing you as a public figure and then coming in with the hate, with the judgment, with the criticism. And what this really is, all these trolls, what they're really doing is projecting their own fears, insecurities on this avatar, so that they can feel better about themselves. So we know the nature of this. But that doesn't take away from the fact that as a young 20-something-year-old, like going into this, and again, jumping into this, this is fun. I love it. It's fun. Like, I love it. And not actually being aware, prepared, or tooled up with what the consequences would have been for you. And I find this when I have conversations with people who came into fame really fast, really early. This is a recurring theme, which is that they did not have the mental preparation, the emotional regulation, the nervous system, right? Like, they just were not equipped to handle or even predict the consequences that fame would bring, the consequences of what would happen. And even when the hater does slip into the DM with a really nasty personal comment, what do? If you don't even know you don't even know what projection means in that moment in time, you don't even know or have the conscious awareness that these people are having their own issues in their own life, or, all the work that you have done since then wasn't there. It wasn't there since then. And so that's what I'm hearing, because it's really important to point this out, as I know there's so many people that do take on these comments and they take it personally. And so many of the times is because they don't have the awareness of why this is happening and how it's actually not about you. It's not even personal. It's about this person. But to create that separation, Naomi, is really hard. And, I found it, like, in as much personal work as I've done, as tooled up as I am, as nervous system, all my nervous system practices, all the coaches, all the work that I've done in the past decade. And I don't even get like a minimal fraction of the criticism that you get. And I notice the way that my nervous system goes, like, when I do see a really, really mean comment, or something. So, and the other thing that I'm hearing as well about the love, and that was actually part of one of my questions around whether you feel you've gotten desensitized to that love, because when people are like, millions of people are pouring admiration into you and telling you how beautiful you are, how smart you are, how great you are all the time, like you said, it's not normal. And so it's really curious. I'm really curious about whether that has created, full of transparency. Do you get desensitized to that? And if so, how do you get plugged back in? because it's very easy. And this is true about humans. It's not just you. It's very, very easy for us to focus on the negative and on all the things that are being criticized, even if it's a tiny percentage, than it is for us to focus on the abundance. The brain is trained for survival, and we're trained to go straight into where we lack. And part of our evolutionary journey is to recondition ourselves to actually be at default in abundance instead of scarcity. So that was a lot of questions rolled into one, but to make it easier for you, do you get sensitized to the positive? If so, what are you doing about it? And how is the negative impacting you today with the tools that you have?
Celine, you have just summarized all of that so perfectly. So I just want to say thank you. Like the way you just described like being unequipped, I was like, yes, yes. Oh, so thank you for that. I just wanted to put that little piece in. But in terms of am I desensitized to the love, to the kindness, there have been phases, 100% yes, where I have been desensitized, and I could have received 100 beautiful, kind, compassionate messages from strangers, but there would be one negative, and I'm sad and I feel ashamed to even admit this, but I could scroll through all the kind comments, almost looking for the one negative, and then I'd stop at the negative. And that's the one that stays with me all day. Over the 100 beautiful, kind words that have been shared and sent my way, instead of feeling gratitude for those 100 messages, it would be the one negative that would stand out. And that has been possibly the hardest thing to overcome, to not allow one negative message to stand out over the 100 beautiful, kind words. And something that I'm doing now is to consciously really read the comments, all of them. And responding has really helped because, like I say, I could easily have just scrolled through almost looking for the negative. And then, that's the one that sticks with me. Whereas now it's like, actually, if I receive a beautiful message in my Instagram DMs, I'll take time to read and respond. And that is a way for me to really absorb it and to receive that kindness. The negativity can still get to me. And I actually realized only yesterday that because I have been online for so many years, my audience have grown up with me. And of course, they've seen me grow up. They have observed the journey I've been on for so many years. There have been so many shifts and moments of evolution. And, I say I'm going to go this way, and then suddenly I U-turn and I go that way. And, if we all reflect on our 20s, we've had moments of this, I'd be very surprised if anyone has had like a perfectly smooth sailing, linear journey through their 20s, but everything just goes to plan. So sharing my life online has obviously, I've had a lot of eyes and a lot of criticism on certain life choices I've made. But I think it's in those moments, that those chapters of change in my life where I receive the criticism of that change, that's when I'm highly vulnerable and I take it on board, because I have those doubts myself. I'm having those exact fears. So when someone sends me, an essay about how I'm a lost soul, and I said I was going to do this, and I'm a hypocrite because now I've gone and done this, and they've quoted me from 2010, and, now I'm doing the complete opposite, and, pointing the fingers and really, really holding up a mirror. They're often saying all of the things that I'm already feeling inside, all of that self-doubt, the self-criticism, the fear that I hold over the decisions I'm making in my life. And that's when it is most challenging for me, because it's a sore point.
The first thing I want to say is that you are not alone. I have a lot of conversations with a lot of people, a lot of also successful people by, successful by the societal standards. And what I can say to you, that this sentiment of, the scrolling, and stop at the one comment is very, again, I don't like to use the word normal, but it's commonplace, because our brain is wired for survival. We are wired to search for the threat. So even on a biological level, that habit is nothing to be ashamed of. It's just something that gets to be corrected because it feels better to not have that habit. And what I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many, but I'll speak from my personal experience. I needed, in my earlier stages of my career, I created a folder called People I Inspired. And, I started as a travel influencer as well. So I had a bit of an experience similar to yours, where my first year starting, I had to put together this folder. And I remember that anytime I felt doubt, and anytime I felt scared, and anytime I felt like my voice didn't matter, I would go back to that folder and I would read the most beautiful messages that people sent me, so that I could remember why I was doing what I was doing. Because I had a similar pattern of, I remember I would take the time, if somebody said something rude, I would take the time to respond and defend myself and, show them, convince them that they're wrong. But I wouldn't take a fraction of that time to respond to the people who were saying beautiful things to me. And it was something that I caught on earlier in my career, and understanding wow, this is not healthy, because I'm actually giving my energy to the toxicity, and I'm feeding the toxicity instead of redirecting that energy to the positive. And I feel this is what you're speaking into, is a very important life hack, regardless of whether you're online on social media or not, which is the importance of training your brain to focus on the positive, to focus on what empowers you, and to not get desensitized to it. Because it's very easy when we have these amazing things in our life, or in your case, when there's all this praise coming in, to normalize it. But I think the beauty of life is, I don't ever want how lucky and how blessed I am. I don't think I want it to feel normal. I always want it to feel really special, because that's what brings us awe and wonder and joy, and just keeps us in that expansive state. And so that's one piece. The second piece that you were speaking into, around how it impacts you, oh my gosh, let's talk about that, because this is really, really important. And even when I see all these people hating on, the latest celebrity that's getting trashed, the latest political drama that's happening, and all this attention that people focus on someone else's life, it drives me bananas, because every single one of us goes through turmoil. Every single one of us goes through challenge. Every single one of us goes through transition. The difference for someone like you is that you're doing it out loud, is that you're doing it publicly. And I can relate to that to a certain extent, because there's been so many times, even in my career as a coach, is that I've transitioned. I've changed niches. I've evolved my body of work. And there have been those moments where I was in that tender transitional state, where that one sales call, and someone starts to question you, and you're like, or, that one comment that might even be coming from a friend. And you're like, wait, am I doing it wrong? Because when we are in a state of transition, I see it as it's that butterfly, and you're a caterpillar, and you need to dissolve yourself, completely dissolve yourself, to be in a cocoon. And I read once that if that cocooning stage is interrupted at any moment, the butterfly will not emerge. At any moment, there's a sudden noise, there's a poke, the thing falls over, gone is the butterfly. It is an extremely delicate process, the metamorphosis. And we as human beings do not, it's harder and harder, getting harder and harder, especially when we're online, to have that delicacy of you having your privacy and your space to cocoon and to evolve into this next variation of you. But instead, you've chosen to do it out loud, which in and of itself is an act of courage. Because if we didn't have people who put their hands up and were willing to show up and change out loud and show people what it looks like, we'd all be sitting in our little caves thinking we were freaks, and thinking something was wrong with us, and questioning ourselves over and over again, thinking, oh my God, I am clearly the only person that is going through this struggle and this challenge on the entire planet, and there is no one else who relates to this. And you know, the gift of people that are willing to speak their truth out loud. Yes, there's cons, which we're getting into and we've started to get into, but the gift is that as you have moved through your stages and certain people have grown up with you, people have been able to watch you. And I am sure in the midst of the hatred, because there's so much more love, that there's so many people that were grateful for your changing out loud, because it gave them permission to be able to go through a change out loud as well, in whatever capacity that looked like for them. So with all of that being said, this piece, yeah, it's vulnerable. It's freaking vulnerable and challenging and painful and awkward and doubtful and all the things to be going through what is a perfectly normal thing in life, which is a transition of you growing up into the next chapter of your life, and having all these people who are reading the lines as they're being written, and then some of them having the wherewithal to think that they get to comment on it and tell you where to go. And the real strength here and the real skill set is understanding how to hold your pen firm and keep writing the story that you want to be writing, regardless of what anyone else has to say about it. And what I know about you is that you are going through this process right now. And so I am curious about, you know, you have mentioned earlier on this spiritual awakening, which is something that, you know, you've shared with me as well, off the episode. And I'm curious, to the extent to which you're willing to share, what's happened? Like, how would you describe the spiritual awakening that now has you in this place in your life, in this chapter, in this transition, asking questions, sometimes doubting yourself, other times fully being like, this is the direction that I'm meant to be in? Will you let us in to the extent that you're comfortable with what's actually going on behind the scenes in this new chapter for you?
Hello, soul family. I hope you're loving this episode so far. Before we dive back in, I'd love to share with you one of my most popular and beloved free resources on how to stand out and magnetize your dream clients with your irresistible story. Because here's the thing, you have a powerful story inside of you. There's no doubt about that. But the question is, are you telling it in a way that empowers you? And not only that, that connects with and compels your audience. Whether you are a business owner or a leader who's in charge of influencing others, this masterclass will propel you in the direction of becoming someone who tells compelling stories that change people's lives, starting with your own. This is the secret sauce to standing out in a crowd of sameness and being seen as a go-to expert. Because here's the truth, if you don't own your story, it will own you. So if you're ready to step into your truth and tell your story unapologetically and confidently without the wobbles, start here. Go to the show notes or type in the link, CelineDacosta.com/free masterclass to dive in. Enjoy. And now let's get back into the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I've taken about a 2-year pause to really explore this world, consciousness. And I think we all choose our realities. I really feel like I have created my reality. And of all the challenge that we've spoken about so far in this episode, I feel like there is still a reason for that, because I've had so many learnings from it, and it has led me on the journey and got me to where I am now, where I have gained a completely new perspective. And I really feel like if all those years ago, when I was 21 years old and I had chosen law as my path, I'd be in a very, very different place. And I would be very surprised if I had found myself exploring these themes and topics of life and consciousness. And so I feel very, very blessed for everything that has come my way, including the hard times and the challenges, because I really have, it's provided an opportunity, I think, for me to learn from. And I where do I start with all of this? I mean, where do I start? 2 years ago, I would say I was deepening my yoga practice, but I very much felt like there was more to the practice than just the asana, the physical movements, the poses. And I've always had a curious mind. Ever since I was very, very little, I've always questioned things, wanted to go a little bit deeper, wanted to scratch the surface, which I know you're like that too. And I think with that kind of curious mind, you can't take things at just surface level as they appear. There's just this inner knowing, this inner feeling that there's more than meets the eye. And so I feel like it started with my yoga practice. I've been practicing yoga for many years, but in my London life, yoga very much was going to the local yoga studio, rolling out your mat, spending an hour doing a vinyasa flow, and then, going to get brunch afterwards, which is all very well and good. I'm, nothing wrong with that at all. But I feel there was a time where I felt like there was more, like I started feeling more energy in my body with the practice. And I was like, well, how can I explore this deeper? What's the next level? And it led into meditation, which then I became curious around breath work. And I was almost living this Bali style
Double
lifestyle.
life.
Double life.
Double agent. Join the
Right.
club.
Yeah. Like a Bali style life, but in London, where I was like exploring meditation, exploring the yoga, exploring wellness to a deeper level than I had allowed myself to before. And I can say that because I've now, been spending a lot of my time in Bali for the last couple of years, and I can reflect and be like, oh, this is what I was like trying to get and trying to feel, but in the city, and it was very, very hard. But 2 years ago, a friend moved to Bali and invited me out to visit her just after COVID, as borders all opened, and I flew out here for 4 weeks, which at the time, 4 weeks was such a commitment. I was like, can I leave London for 4 weeks? How am I going to do that? But of course, as we know, over 2 years later, 2.5 years later, I'm here. I'm still in Bali. I go back and forth. I'm leading this double life of like, there's the London me and then there's the Bali me, but both are equally me. And there's just this dance between the two. It's like the masculine and the feminine. But that was kind of, I found Bali to be, and is, I find Bali is the most beautiful, magical, nurturing place that allows you to really blossom, to really spread your wings, to come out of that cocoon. And I have found Bali has given me permission to be that butterfly that maybe I'm still in the cocoon and a little scared to come out. But also a catalyst for me with my spirituality was, I mean, going much further back now, I think 4 or 5 years ago, was a heartbreak. It took hitting rock bottom, the most, like, for me, heart shattering experience, where my heart was literally being chipped and chiseled open and like smashed open, for me to explore this more deeply. I had all the books in my bookshelf and I had the curiosity, and like I say, I'd been practicing yoga for many years, but it really took something, a catalyst, to give me the opportunity to explore things more deeply. And I genuinely, again, feel like if I'd stayed in that relationship, as much as, at the time it was all I wanted, I wouldn't have really have had a reason, I think, to explore my spiritual self in the way that I have since. So I find it so interesting how it sometimes takes us hitting rock bottom to give us the permission to really crack ourselves open and see, okay, well, who am I then? Let's really do this. Let's dive in deep. I've got nothing to lose now, nothing to lose. So let's do it. I'm going in deep. And so I think there were many different catalysts throughout my life that have taken me on this journey, but definitely having my heart broken was one. And then finding myself in Bali a couple of 2.5 years ago was another. But in terms of like, where has it taken me? Oh, mind has been blown. I've felt things that I never thought I would feel, really exploring my subtle energetic body and working and opening my third eye, I feel is a massive part of it.
A couple of things you shared that I want to reflect back on. So the first piece, what you're describing about the breakup and that pushing you over your edge to explore new heights of yourself, what you were describing is the classic hero's journey. And, you know, I have my version of that. So many leaders out there, I mean, everyone, I would say, has a version of, well, life was going this way and I was, it was going the way that I thought it should. And then something really big, a crisis happened, a breakdown happened, something happened, and it changed and it pushed me over the edge. And when you listen to so many leaders' awakening journeys, it sounds something like that. And here's something that I have discovered in my journey and as well as supporting the transformational journey of others that I feel is really important to share, is that there is a level of addiction that comes with the my life is going this way. I need a crisis and then I'll change. And this is something that I also studied in the work with Dr. Joe Dispenza, whose work I've studied, and I've done also his corporate training. And something he really drills in is that a lot of people, they wait until crisis to change, but you can also change from a place of joy. You can also change from a place of choosing. So I just want to leave that one before we move into the next piece because, because we've all done it. It's in our past, and I have my own story of crisis and then transformation as well. But I don't want to leave the listener feeling, if they're on the brink of change or they're desiring change, that they need to wait until the moment where they have a breakdown or a crisis in order to actually effectuate the change that they are dreaming into being. So let's just leave that one there, because you are welcome to create your transformation and your breakthrough at any time that you choose. And yes, you can do it from joy. And this is something I've been personally experimenting with in my own transition. I'm going through a transition right now, which I talk about in this season of this podcast in another episode. So you can go check that out. And something I've been experimenting with is, instead of asking the question subconsciously of, oh my God, how bad is it going to get before I decide to do something, I'm consciously choosing to ask the question, how good can it get? How can I add joy to this? How can I, in this moment, respond to the situation as that next version of me would, that is calling a new reality into being? So I just want to leave that one there. The second piece, in terms of this awakening journey, this expansion journey that you've been through, is what I find to be really interesting. And I know I've experienced this myself. So I'm speaking from experience. So if this resonates with you, let me know. If it doesn't, then it'll just be my experience. What I have noticed is, when I am going through periods of growth and rapid expansion, it means that I am letting go of old identity and I am stepping into a new identity, a new way of acting, thinking, and feeling, because that's what changes. You change. If you want to change your personality, you need to change your personal reality. And it looks like changing the way you act, the way you think, and the way you feel. Which means the old personality, to some extent, has got to go. It's going to need to dissolve. What I have found in my experience, and where I have met the biggest resistance, the biggest challenge, and the biggest discomfort, is when I build an infrastructure, for example, social media, or another example is the business, and I built an infrastructure based on my old self. So the things that I post, or the ways that my business is structured, the ways, the systems, the people who are working for it, the infrastructure is built to accommodate my old self. And as I've grown, I've noticed that when I let go of my old self, I've also had to make challenging choices to let go of the infrastructure I built, which in my case has practically looked like letting go of people that I was working with that don't resonate with anymore because I hired them based on the old self. It looks like letting go of offers that I used to sell in my business, but I don't resonate with my new self. It's looked like needing to change the way I'm posting because it's not authentic. It was, but it isn't anymore. And that's where I have found the crunchiest, like, painful, let me get out of this cocoon part has been, is loosening up all of those ties to the old self. And sometimes that can be so painful that we are tempted to continue to try to keep the old machine running so we don't have to confront the pain of actually letting it go and standing in the spanking new abyss of the unknown, having no freaking idea what's coming next. Minus the part where you're not 21 and naive. You're now much older, much wiser, much tooled up. And so you're like, oh, I'm going to face the unknown again, but I don't have my naivete with me. I've got actually a lot of wisdom and it's kind of fucking me up sometimes. So I'm just sharing that this has been my experience. And the reason why I share this with you is because my curiosity is, and what I know, my observation of you is that you're in that stage right now where there's a few puppet strings that need to be cut loose. And I'm curious for you during this stage, what are you either letting go of or contemplating? Doesn't mean you're letting go of it. You're just contemplating letting go of. And what are the big changes that you feel you need to make now in how you think, how you act, and how you feel? And that could look like the infrastructure you've built for yourself or anything else that intuitively comes through.
You know, I do resonate with everything you've just shared. And also, it's something I hadn't seen in that way before. So as you were just talking, I was like, wow, okay, yeah, it's like you can energetically conclude something and feel like you're letting go and you're ready to step into the new and welcome in your inner power. But you need to also align the physical world with that.
I'm all about the practical and the mechanical. I'm like all about the energy realms, all about like doing things etherically and in energy. And, energy is 99.9999% of reality. And we're still dealing with a mechanical reality.
Right. Marrying the masculine with the feminine. And it's something that I have actually on an unconscious level been dealing with for the last few months. I have been buried away in admin, clearing up so much. Like this chapter has been a chapter of clearing, cleansing. And I'm talking even down to the nitty gritty of like changing accountants. Like I just needed to. I was like, I've been with my accountants for as many years, I don't know, that I've been doing YouTube. And I was like, new agents, new managers, new everything. Everyone now in my team, everyone who I work with are new. But I actually, and this sounds ridiculous, I hadn't connected the dots of like, I'm energetically going through a big purge, cleanse, stepping into a new phase, big shifts happening on a collective level, right? But also, personal, big shifts happening. And I've just been cleansing in the physical world too, like with all of this admin. And there's been a little lingering frustration in me of like, I just want to get going. I just want to start this new chapter. But this knowing of like, but there's a lot of clearing to do first. And as you say, cutting those puppet strings. And that I've been in the thick of this now for a good few months and I'm at the tail end now. And actually this chapter here in Bali is doing exactly that, just tying those loose ends, cutting the final puppet strings. But hearing you word it in this way, there was like a little click of like, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I'm all we've got to speak the unconscious into conscious. And I'm sure that you're not the only one who's going to be having this click.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting. I've been speaking to a lot of friends who are working in very different fields. There is this collective energy of like shifting into something new and clearing, purging, and even, the friends who I wouldn't speak to necessarily about, energetics. I'm noticing there's this real collective shift happening with people stepping more into their purpose, really following their hearts and feeling called to step more into their authentic selves. And their old world just isn't quite aligning anymore. And it's really interesting to observe this at the moment.
It is absolutely happening on a collective level. And that's why I'm able to articulate all the things I'm articulating. Because trust me, sis, it is not just my own personal stuff. I have been having many conversations with clients, students, colleagues, people like yourself, like the conversations I have with you, but times a couple hundred. And just collecting this data and realizing that this is really happening in a big way. And that's exactly why we're here having a conversation about this, so we can articulate it. So whoever is listening and needing to hear this message today can hear it and remember you are not alone. The same way when you're like, oh, I know this sounds silly, but I scroll and scroll and scroll and then I stop and the hate comment, you're not alone. You just happen to have like 100x than the average human being coming at you. But that's also what gives you the opportunity to learn the lessons around this in a big way. Because if someone's just getting a hater once every 6 months, they don't have the opportunity to learn and embody the lessons of what it means to not let people get to you, what it means to focus on the love rather than the hate, and all these pieces that you have learned and embodied and are learning to embody. You have the opportunity to do that because you have a huge platform where you get to experience this in volume, in masses. The same way that somebody who's, making millions of dollars has an opportunity to learn these incredible lessons around money, around boundaries, around emotional, mental health, around, divorcing your self-worth from your net worth. And they're able to do that at an accelerated rate because they have like more of that energy coming at them at the same time. So, there's so much wisdom in addition to all the incredible things that you have shared on social media. There's so much wisdom that you hold around the act of being on social media and the act of being, an online public figure that people can learn from, even if they have just a couple followers. And as I'm sure that, this episode has become clear on so far. So I'm curious about, based on what you're going through in your own awakening journey and, kind of living this double life that you are in the process of learning how to integrate so you can come back into a deeper wholeness. What is your relationship with social media now? Do you see yourself doing what you've been doing for the past 10 years? Do you see yourself transforming your relationship to it? I think I know the answer to this, but I want you to say it out loud. Like what are you seeing? And especially given what you're noticing in terms of the changes within the paradigm of social media, which is not the same, or YouTube, it's not the same as it was 10 years ago. So I'm curious about where you stand right now in your relationship with social media, both for yourself and as a collective.
It's a massive time of transformation for me with social media. It's time to adapt and transform. But the biggest thing for me that I have come to realize very, very recently is that I love creating content. I feel this natural, innate, instinctive feeling to create and share. And as challenging as it has been, it's something that I know right now is my calling to continue doing. It is going to transform. It is going to adapt, as I have transformed and I have adapted on a personal level. But I think one of the things that I would love to share more is to share more joy, to share more love, because I really, truly feel like we're all here to have this human experience, to feel and experience joy, to feel and experience love. And I would love for my content to reflect that. And I've been holding back big time. It's something we were talking about a few weeks ago. I have been very much living in fear with social media, and I have been holding back, almost like hiding away, shying away out of fear of how are people going to respond? How are people going to feel about this? I've felt very highly vulnerable sharing my true, authentic experience online out of fear of how people will react. Whereas what I am doing right now, what my transformative phase is now with social media, is being my true, authentic self, letting go of the fear and speaking my truth. And it's, easier said than done, but it's my real intention now to step forward and share from my truest self. No matter how vulnerable that may feel, I think it's actually more vulnerable to be holding back and kind of trying to do your thing privately and then sharing one thing. And I'm ready to let all of that fear go now and just step into this calling.
Mm. And what happens when all of the people that are so used to who you are, what used to be, fight back or are mad because you're not posting the same comment? What happens when the haters come? What happens when people start being like, but Naomi used to be... What happens then? I'm curious. Have you prepared for this? Because I know you didn't 10 years ago, but you're a different woman now.
I'm a different woman now. I've been gathering my tools. They're in my back pocket. I feel like I am ready. I am prepared. And, I read something recently that said the reason some people struggle with seeing their loved ones change and transform is because they're no longer the people that they fell in love with. So it takes adapting. It takes time to come round to the new person, to get to know the butterfly who was once a cocoon, or even a different colored butterfly, And it's the same even for parents with their children. Sometimes parents can find it very challenging to get on board with a transformation of their child, even if that means seeing their child grow into an adult. Flying the nest can be hugely challenging. And I just read this piece that was saying it's because the parent loved the child. They loved looking after the child. And it's hard to let that go and learn to love the adult. And I think sometimes for me, I can see that can be the case with my audience even. They were used to me maybe when I was 21, 22. I was a very, very different person. And so, of course, I'm going to receive comments from my audience now being like, you've changed. You're different. You seem like you're a different person now. And they can use all kinds of words to describe the feeling that they have, which is that I'm a different person and I've changed. I'm now seeing it as a compliment. What used to really offend me and I take to heart, and I would think, and it would make me shy away and think, oh, okay, I need to go back to who I was. Why am I different? Now I'm reading these comments and I'm seeing it from a very different perspective, and I'm taking it as a compliment. I respond to those comments. Thank you. Thank you. I have changed. And what a privilege it is to change. And I am so happy that I have changed. No hatred to the girl I once was. I love her, but I also love who I am now. And I'm so grateful for the journey I've been on to get me to where I am now. So thank you for your message. Thank you for your observation.
Mm-hmm. I love this. There's a song that I unfortunately don't know the name of or the specific lyrics of, but you'll get the gist. It's a really beautiful medicine song that a woman is singing about the woman who she is today, and she says, "I stand on the bones of all the women who were me before me."
And I lay at her feet.
Oh my God, I have chills. You know the song. I literally got goosebumps all over my body. I still have them, like chills. That you knew exactly what song. Oh my God, I literally have chills everywhere. Okay, amazing. You know that song. And if you know that song, spin it to me later because I have it in my brain. I'm like, what is that song? What is that song? But because I want to listen to it again. It really struck me when I heard it. It was like, wow, like who I am is yeah, it's on the bones of every other version of me that I am. And I feel like, I can speak to this in my own journey. There's been times where, yeah, I did receive a level of criticism, or I did. And you know what? A lot of times that criticism came from me, even more than other people, because nobody can talk to us as bad as we talk to ourselves in our head, and that's where the hook is. That's where the trigger is, when somebody, like you were sharing, reflects back to you in unkind words, the doubt that you're feeling inside of yourself, that there's probably a little voice that is speaking just as unkindly to you. And when we clean up that voice, and when we notice it and clean it up and change it to a more compassionate way of relating to ourselves, then someone comes at us with these terrible words and they don't affect us as much, because we've got us, we've got ourselves. And not only that, people, when they say, oh, well, this version of you, I liked her better. Well, the only time where that really hurt me is when there was a part of me that actually believed that that version of me, either I felt like, oh, what are you talking about? She's so much worse. Or I felt that she was so much better. But actually, no, it's all me, all these versions that you've been your entire life, or, more specifically in the online public record, these past 10 years of who you've been, they are all versions of you. And at every single level, there is a group of people that resonated with that version of you. And some of those people also evolved and grew with you, as you shared. Some people are still holding on to the image of who you once were. And it's easy to do that when that image is imprinted on the internet, right? If it was somebody that met you 10 years ago, it's easier to let go of when there isn't a post to point back into, or a video to be like, oh, the good old Naomi, I missed her. It's so much easier for other people to let go of former versions of ourselves when we don't have a literal documentation of every single version. So again, from where I sit, I believe it's an act of courage to be willing to document ourselves. Even when I look sometimes at Celine, like baby coach Celine 8 years ago, like doing these videos, I'm like, oh my God, ew, cringe, but there were people in that moment at that time that really needed to hear what I needed to say. And the only reason I'm freaking judging that is because I'm 8 years wiser and I grow exponentially fast. But there's still people. I mean, I had somebody the other day quote me on something I said on like year 2 of me starting my business. And I thought to myself, wait, that's actually a pretty good quote. But here I was dismissing a past version of me because I'm like, oh, she didn't know any better. But then when someone else resurfaced something I said that while ago, I thought to myself, that's pretty wise. And I need to take that back and keep incorporating it in my work today, because I still mean what I said. I can just articulate it better, and I have a deeper embodiment around it. So it's so important to honor these past versions of ourselves. So I'm really glad that you spoke into that. And the ingredient, as always, is self-love, and continuing to work on ourselves and develop our tools to regulate our nervous system, to shift our belief systems from toxic to empowering, and to allow ourselves to continue to expand and grow and give ourselves permission to be authentically ourselves. That's our inner work. And whatever happens on the external is just curriculum. So something else that I feel is really important for us to speak into for people who are not influencers, or they don't have 1 million+ followers. They're just people listening right now. And they have these fears around, posting and being public and being seen. I think it's really tempting for people, for the masses. I include myself in that statement. People who don't have less than 1 million followers, let's say, or even less than 10,000, to look at these influencers and to look at these people that have massive followings and they say one thing and then tons of people buy, or whatever the story is, and be like, wow, their life is so amazing. Everything's so fabulous. Everything they say, people pay attention. The good old stories, putting influencers on a pedestal. And I'm wondering, you being on the back end of it, can you just pop that bubble for anyone who is still living under the illusion that having a large social media account is the way to go? Hopefully by this time in this episode, you're seeing that there's pros and there's gifts. There's beautiful things to be had from having this level of influence and visibility. There's also cons. So hopefully you're seeing that. But if you could summarize, Naomi, because I get so many people that are like, I wish I had, as many followers as you, or I can't I work with a lot of coaches, consultants, service providers. I can't do this work because I don't have enough followers. There's a lot of excuses that happen around why we can't be seen, put ourselves out there in our craft, because we don't have enough followers. So can you give us like just a little sneak peek into the underbelly of the influencer world so that people are just very clear what they're wishing for? If they're like, I want 1 million followers, like, okay, here's the cons, and then what is the, if somebody does want to, you know, get more seen and become more of a public, in the public eye, what do they need to know?
The cons of social media. You need to prepare yourself for the negativity as well. Like we've spoken throughout this whole episode, you will receive a lot of love, I'm sure, but then there'll also be the flip side. So I think it is about going in, knowing what you're getting yourself into, equipping yourself, feeling prepared. And it might not happen as well. You might receive nothing but love. I'm sure that can happen for some people online. But my experience is that we do need to prepare ourselves for the darker side of social media. And I'm not just speaking about the comments, by the way, on YouTube and Instagram, the ones that you see publicly and the private ones within the platform. There are external websites, forums, where they're purely there to speak about hatred. I won't say like the names of these websites, but they have been hugely detrimental to so many people online, influencers, celebrities, where there's pure hatred forums where it's like the regular trolls that go on there to discuss everything and anything. I almost see them like they're waiting in the bushes with their binoculars at like for you to slip up about anything, and it will be discussed on there. I made a promise to myself about 5 years ago to never go on these forums again. The problem is, if they start discussing a friend or a partner or a family member or something, those people around you can then see it, and then you immediately get the call or the message or the screenshot being like, oh my God, what's going on, what's being said. And so it can be quite hard to avoid. And I think the average person isn't even aware of these forums. And I've thought about so many ways to have these shut down, whether it's through campaigns, because, there are friends who have had death threats. There are friends who have tried to have their children taken off them. Like and friends who have had their home private addresses shared on these forums. Like it has really escalated. It's become very, very nasty, very bitter, very, very dark. So when I'm talking about the dark side of social media, I'm not just talking about the, oh, you've put on weight kind of comments. It's like the real darkness that's mostly outside of YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. There's external websites specifically for hatred. So I would say to someone who's like thinking, oh, it must be amazing to have 1 million followers, like the reality of it can be very, very different to what you would expect. And I'd think very carefully about whether you really want to have your personal private life online. Sometimes I think it would be so lovely to be completely anonymous and not have social media at all, and not have an Instagram account and not have the YouTube account. I dream of those days sometimes. So it's not all love and light and all beautiful and rosy and full of love. There's a real other side to it. The other thing is, I would say, as much as I have the opportunity now to like step into my truth and use my voice, we all do. And I think that's a part of this massive shift that we're all experiencing, is to really step into our truth. Every single person listening to this episode has the opportunity to speak their truth, whether that's to their family, whether that's at work. There's an opportunity to step up and really discover and explore your true self. And you've got a voice, so use it, because the universe needs you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And for those who are listening and they're desiring, I don't want to scare anyone off that's like, but actually, I do have this desire in my heart to amplify my voice to a large audience. And I do want to put myself out there in a bigger way. Some people are like, whoa, permission slip, don't need to be on social media, peace. But other people are like, you know what? But I do feel like I'm meant to be a bigger public voice. Would you be able to share some advice on how they can do that in a way where they can maintain their authenticity, where they don't, the lessons you've learned, if you can package them so that people don't need to lose themselves in this process? And how can someone become more influential and more of a public figure in their message and retain their integrity, retain their authenticity, and really be able, as you said, to speak their truth to the world?
So we've spoken about the cons, and now it's about the pros. What is the positive side, and how can someone step into their authentic self online and feel empowered to do that? I think it all comes from an inner belief, a self-love. How you feel about yourself will really be reflected online. So I think it's all about doing the work, doing the inner work, really stepping into self-love, taking care of yourself, and really taking a moment when you post. Is this authentic? Does this feel right? I think there's often a pressure with content creators to be constantly posting. And I kind of spoke into this at the beginning of how creativity isn't linear. It's not consistent. And I think that's where a lot of us can end up feeling the pressure to just post because we have to post. And we have to, put something out because it's been a few days or a few weeks. And for me, sometimes a few months. But I would really encourage people to let go of that pressure. Like, forget about the algorithm. Doesn't matter. Just post whatever feels true to you. And maybe that means posting multiple times a day, but maybe that means posting once a fortnight. If that feels right for you, stick to that. And just, I would say, prioritize posting authentically over posting for the algorithm. And that can slippery slope, I think, for many content creators.
Yep. I was never on the train of dancing on TikTok. I proudly am still not on TikTok. I've been able to fight yet another social addiction. But in all seriousness, I love what you're saying, which is post authentically, go at your own rhythm. And before you post, really ask yourself, is this coming from soul? Or is this coming from a part of me that's, trying to be validated right now, or a pressure of needing to perform, or a pressure of needing to post? And it's so important to do these check-ins with yourself, because, that saying, quality over quantity, I really believe in it. And I've even noticed that when I was over posting, I was just exhausting myself. But when I only really post when it comes from the heart, it's more focused, and the doing less with more intention actually has more impact. That's been my experience as I continue to geek out on human performance and how we can optimize our energy. That's one of the biggest things that I've discovered. So thank you so much for giving these tips, as I'm sure they're going to be very valuable. So don't be scared. Be aware, go into it with eyes wide open, and know that, as with anything in life, there's a light side, there's a shadow side. So tool up, do the inner work, get the tools to deal with the shadow side. And that's, then come into the light side and spread your magic, because that's what you're here to do. So beautiful. With all of that being said, Naomi, as we conclude today's episode, is there anything else that you feel inspired to leave our listeners with? If yes, then this is the moment. And if not, you can proceed to let us know where and how we can find you on the internet.
Thank you so much for having me. I have loved this conversation, and I so appreciate you creating this space. I would say to the audience listening now, you are so needed. You are so wanted. Your voice is valid, and do not be distracted by the numbers that we see on social media. It's all a facade. We're all equal. And someone with 1 million followers doesn't mean that their voice is more valid than yours. So I would just love to leave that there. And thank you, Celine, for having me. I so appreciate you.
Of course. Of course. And where do we find you, Naomi?
You find me.
We're talking about all your followers. Can you let people like join on this club? It's like, this whole time we're just talking about the millions, and maybe someone's like, "Hey, want to check this girl out." Maybe. Like, who is she?
If you would like to find me and follow me and see what I'm all about, I'm at Naomi Smart on Instagram, and on YouTube it's /Naomi Smart. So it's nice and easy.
I love it. And this will all be linked in the show notes. I just think it's hilarious that you are of this, of my entire guest crew, you were the one with the most followers and literally forgot to mention what your account is. That's really precious.
By accident. Like,
I know.
It wasn't
it's all like poetically super perfect. I love the way it works out. Well, anyway, now you know where to find this woman. And if there's anything that struck you from this episode, take a screenshot, tag us, let us know what you loved. Let us see. Send us some love, I guess you could say, Be one of the 100 who send the love. But jokes aside, we're really curious to hear what struck you the most, what felt the most important from this episode. And those of you who feel inspired and love this conversation, it would be so deeply appreciated if you also could pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. It's called It's Not What You Think. Obviously, you know it because you're here. And yeah, really, really excited for you to get all the nuggets out of this episode. And thank you so much for your support. Thank you, Naomi. I will be seeing you very soon somewhere around the world. Of that, I am sure. Thank you, beautiful humans, for tuning in to today's episode of It's Not What You Think. If you loved what you received today, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts as it helps us reach even more amazing listeners like you. If we aren't already connected on social media, come receive even more tips and inspiration by following me on Instagram at Celine DaCosta or visiting my website at celinedacosta.com. After listening to this episode, I invite you to take a few moments to reflect. What stood out to you? What were your key takeaways or breakthroughs? And if there was one action step you could take from this, what would it be? Thank you again for joining me on this journey. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait to connect in the next episode. Until then, keep sharing your unique gifts and living out your most magical life.